Welcome to Journey to Justice. I'm Eiko Kosasa, and this is part 2 of our interview with Momiala Kamahele, a kumu Hula and assistant professor of Hawaiian Studies at Leeward Community College in Hawaii. In part 1, Kamahele discussed growing up Hawaiian within a colonial context and the path that led her to become an educator. And now, part 2. When you do things, you protest, you stand up, you say things, it changes you inside.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It changed me inside. So that first March, I remember we were at Porteous, I think it was. And we had to march. We hadn't yet been at Hawaiian Studies. And we marched from Porteous to, is it Sakamaki with the philosophy? Yeah. And there was a small little group of us, and we had our signs, and we gathered there, and the crowd began to build. And I just went, wow. College can be exciting. And it's not only about the classroom and, sitting and reading books and being in a dusty archive. It really is about action.
Yeah.
And I guess in academe, there are these two schools, where you're not supposed to do that, You're the academic. You're supposed to stay in the tower. You discuss the theory. You write about it, You're not to taint your scholarship with being involved in action. Well, to me, that's a lot of baloney. Why am I learning all this stuff if I can't take it outside, out to help people?
Right.
And so with that experience, when I became the teacher, one of my mantras in the classroom is, from the time you're born to the time you die, what you going to do with your life? You got some choices along the way. Well, you've chosen to come to school. Well, that's great. And now, so you have an understanding of our history, of Hawaiian history. Now what you going to do? Yeah. Now, your job, you have kuleana. And I know many of you have already taken up that kuleana. And I say, how you taking up that kuleana is now you become the kumu at home. Because I know, and every time I say this, I can see my students starting to chuckle, or they're just rolling their eyes. I said, because I know you go home and you tell me, you know what kumu said today? And you have this discussion, and sometimes, your family members or your friends don't agree, but I know you're having this discussion. And that's when I know I'm successful. Because now you're taking this information and you're beginning to try to understand it. Okay, that's great. Now what you gonna do? Because you don't want to wake up tomorrow and find a tall building in your backyard and wonder, how did that building get there? That's the wrong time to wonder why. The right time is before it happens. You get involved in your community. You find out who are the leaders in your community. And I learned all of that from the time I took Christina's class in the 1980s to the time, Hawaiian Studies was being built, the sovereignty movement was, flourishing, getting involved in my community. When the call to action came, get down there, find out what the protest is all about. And then a lot of it became behind the scenes organizing.
Right.
And I think that's what college can do, education does, is it has you look to organize. And what I mean by that is, now that you've had all this education in your head, how do you put that into an 8.5 by 11 flyer so that you can educate the community who is curious, because they want to know what the issue, why are people mad at each other? So you take that education that you've learned at the university, an 8.5 by 11 flyer, you begin to bullet point and highlight the issues, highlight your position. And I learned that in the classroom, but I learned that by doing.
So really, you look at your academic, like you're saying, knowledge, and you're just merging it with activity. So it becomes political.
Yeah, the action is very political.
Yeah, because I think about your life you're a kumu hula, you're a professor here at Leeward Community College, and you're an activist, but it's all about teaching other people. I mean, all three of them, although it's in different arenas, it still involves being a teacher
Yeah.
and teaching, passing on the thing.
Yeah, passing it on, yeah.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is when you mentioned Kumuhula, and I didn't really touch on the cultural part of it, but that whole hula cultural practice was something that I fell into as well. Again, I credit my parents. They certainly wanted me to learn a part of the culture, and so taking hula lessons was a big part of it. And when I went to school and I started taking all these classes that made me politically aware, I began to look at the cultural side of Hawaiian culture. And I'm taking these history classes, and I'm looking at other Pacific Island nations, and I'm going, oh my God, they have similar histories to us. I started taking classes that involved Africans in Africa and their struggle.
Yeah.
And I'm going, oh my God, there's lots of these similar stories. So I began to sort of look at the hula part of the culture as political. And I remember one day thinking, nobody really looked at hula that way. Hula was this very soft practice. But was there a political side to it? Was there a resistance side to hula? So I started to do research. And then I looked at some of the hula that I learned, and I went, this is political. When in the chant or in the hula they're telling you to hold on to your practice, hold on to your traditions, otherwise, it's going to disappear. That's political.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I didn't see was the political aspect of the soft culture. And that existed, it had to exist hand in hand. And to me, it came to a head when in 1993, we had the Ikepono March. And Kalahui had put together this march. And we had marched from the pier to Iolani Palace. And I was close to the front. And as we were getting close to the gates, I could hear chanting.
Of Iolani Palace.
At Iolani Palace. And I went, who is that? And so as we came around, we were going into the gates and we were going into the palace, and right by the palace, there was Kumuhula chanting to bring the political people in. And I went, oh my God. So I saw this in modern times at least, the very beginnings of the melding between the politics and the cultural side of our culture.
Wow.
Where people would ordinarily see hula as, that's the culture.
Right.
Doesn't have anything to do with politics. Well, it has a lot to do with politics,
To me, it in the larger public's mind, we could see it in Senate Bill 8 with ulaokalani, right? Because you were one of the main organizers for that. So can you share a little bit about that?
I had looked at this point in time, had looked at hula politically more so, and wrote this very small little article about its history. Not the history that you read about, the development, but the fact that from time immemorial to my generation, about 2,000 years, that the hula has gone through, being sort of at the top of the heap and had to be suppressed and then rise again and suppress and rise again, etc. So given that history, I thought, wow, for it to do that, it had a political side. Right. So I was formulating this consciousness in my mind, and I get this call from my dear friend, and who advises me about this bill called Senate Bill 8 about gathering rights. And I'm going, gathering rights? What is that? I don't know what that is. And this was in when was it? I forget what year. I don't want to say 1998, anyway. In the middle 1990s, there was this bill that had to do with, I'm trying to remember the date here, that had to do with what we saw as abridging our right to gather resources, to gather the kinolau from the aina, from the land, in order for us to practice our religion and our cultural practices. And so what evolved was, first there were individual testimony to the legislature to kill this bill. When that didn't work, the Hula organized. And I was in that original group as a co-founder for an organization called Ilio, ulaokalani. And this organization brought together primarily Hula from across the archipelago, but it wasn't exclusively Hula. There were other people, there we had surfers. We had other practitioners who themselves didn't know what was coming down the pike. And we were sort of very naive about the laws in terms of our culture. And what we discovered in the process was there was a constitutional amendment that essentially said Native Hawaiians have the right to gather and exercise, to gather the resources from the land to practice their culture. We didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. In the state constitution.
In the state, it wasn't just a law.
Yeah.
It was like it was codified in the Constitution.
Right.
I mean that was just important, and so we organized. We mobilized people to become aware of what was happening. And
because the bill wanted you guys to have to, if you went up a certain ahupua'a, you have to show your lineage there and that your ancestors had always gathered from that specific place, right?
Parts of the bill wanted us to carry around an identifying card that said that we were Native Hawaiian and that we were cultural practitioners, and we went, wait a minute, no, we shouldn't have to do that on our own land. There was another provision of the bill that said you can only, gather your resources, your ferns, your flowers, what have you, to practice your culture, only in the ahupua or the district that you lived in. Now, as practitioners, we know that there are certain kinolau for our cultural practice that we cannot get on one island because it only grows on another island. Or we cannot get it in this ahupua district because it only grows in another ahupua, another district. So we said, well, no, we didn't like that part of the bill. So essentially what we saw was, and I remember writing this because somebody helped me think this through, it was as if picking a flower would criminalize us. And we said, no. We didn't. So we mobilized, got the kumu together. We did this vigil, and, we didn't know whether we were going to win or not. I mean, this was really, the people, us little people, against the giant behemoth that was the legislature. They were the power people. But in the process, what we began to realize was, wait a minute, in a democracy, the power is supposed to be with the people. Right. And it's our kuleana to make sure that those people that are put in office, that they follow what we want. Right. So our thinking began to shift, and that became really powerful. Because once we began to understand that, the legislators, we essentially forced them to come to the vigil, because we were in the rotunda, we had the drums, we were sounding the drums every hour on the hour, and it must have rattled them because this sound funneled through the rotunda, and it really disturbed the whole area, so much so that they came out, they wondered what we were doing, what we were up to. And I think they really underestimated our power, and so did we. Mm-hmm. What we didn't realize was that not only does this affect the practitioners, but it had fingers in all parts of the community. Because you might be the practitioner, but you might know somebody whose auntie or whose cousin or whose daughter or whose son was in a halal or was a supporter of a halal or who furnished goods for the halal, etc. So the hula, because it's so part of our culture, it's embedded in all parts of our culture. And so when it came to the actual vigil, we had, so many people there. We were shocked, and so were the legislators. I want to say we had over like 2,000 people there.
I think so, yeah.
That supported us. I mean, we were stunned. And we're even more stunned when the authors of the bill, Malama Solomon and Randy Iwase, they came down to defend the bill. And we said, this isn't going to work. So essentially, what our effort did was it killed the bill.
Yeah.
And we went, wow, that was powerful. Yeah. Of course, we realized that, this could happen again the next session. And sure enough, happened again. And there we were. My coming to this political awareness was a long journey. Mm-hmm. So if I had to really pinpoint the moment, it would be from, the late 70s through the 1980s and the 1990s, the early part of the 1990s. Right. So by the time I got to the Ilio thing in 97, I was politically there.
Yeah.
I understood my history. I understood the oppression. I understood the need for self-determination. I understood what those terms were. I understood that there was a possibility of having two Hawaii because historically there are two Korea, there are two Samoa. So the possibility of having two Hawaii was not impossible. Right. So by the time we got to that point,
yeah,
my historical political consciousness was ready.
Wow.
And of course, along the way, I got asked to teach, and I thought, okay, I don't know if I'd be any good at it. I remember the first day I was a little nervous. And, from that moment on, I've been a teacher.
Yeah.
But I've been at the right place. I've been at the right place, and I've been prepared to be at that place when the door opened and said, do you want to be the teacher? I went, okay.
Wow. Yeah. And I know in your classes, you take your students to different sites that's...
Yeah.
And not just one or two, you go to a lot of places over the semester. So I can see that's part of how you were educating your own connections, intellectual connections of you put this into action, right? So they go to visit places, right?
The whole idea of sacred places to me is important for my students to understand that this isn't just a visitor attraction. Every semester I take my students to Ka'ala Farms in Waianae. And I'm always startled by the fact that there are many students in my class born and raised in Waianae who have never been to Ka'ala. I also take them to Halava Valley. And I remember that struggle. Kupuna in their 60s and older who are trying to stop the state from building a freeway through Halava Valley. And so those are other examples for me as the younger generation, looking at this older generation going, look, they're doing something. What am I doing?
Oh,
So that was another part of the political consciousness. I had role models and mentors in Auntie Sweets. They were the ones that stood up and said no, and I thought, man, they're my mother's generation. What am I doing?
Yeah.
They're older than me, so they were like the role models.
Right.
And they were successful. Yeah. They didn't stop the freeway, but they forced the state to go around the sacred sites to have them honor those sacred sites.
Yeah.
So I think my coming to political consciousness has a lot to do with really, I guess I can use this word, being betrayed. When you learn your history that wasn't told to you in school, there's a sense of betrayal. For somebody like me, it's like, now how can I fix this? Because if I can fix it for me and be the teacher that helps to fix it for my students, it's like, okay, this is a good thing. So the the connection to the land, yeah, which is the family part, the the need to be educated, surrounding myself with like-minded people, taking the academic classes that pushed my political consciousness and pushed me into articulating and writing about it. And then the right at the, ground zero type of action,
Right. Right.
I think helped to bring me to this point today, so that when I'm in a classroom and I talk about history, especially when I talk about Hawaiian history, I feel very confident. Because when I'm talking about Hawaiian studies and I'm talking about things Hawaiian, I'm essentially talking about my journey.
Right.
That Hawaiian journey.
Yeah.
You have this history. Colonialism hides this history. You are oppressed. They tell you the narrative or the story that says, no, you're not oppressed. This is the best thing that ever happened to you, to be colonized and to be oppressed. And then you come out the other end and you go, well, wait a second, this isn't the best thing that happened to me, because Hawaiians are the lowest attainment in education, at the highest, health rates, et cetera, and so forth. And you go, okay, so how do you fix it? Well, the path I've taken is education. Because to me, that's the more long-term support, the more long-term effect.
You mean in being able to teach the next
Yes.
generation, the next generation, the
Yes.
next generation?
Yes. We're not in control.
Yeah, it's just regulating your life.
Yeah, and that's a part that it's hard for people to understand. It's our culture, but we're not in control of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's our culture, but we still have to ensure that it's for profit. That it has to be profitable to the colonial structure.
Yeah.
So I can remember when I was in the tourist industry, and the hula dancer on stage, and how the boss would want, can we have a little more skin? Yes, make that hula skirt a little bit shorter. Yeah, can we have you wear coconut bras instead?
Yeah.
Can you put on more makeup?
Yeah.
And it became clear to me, as I was going through school and still the hula girl, that we're not in control of our culture. That until that happens, until we're in control, then it's always going to be this this imitation of what can be. And I can remember people say, well, let's make it a little more authentic. And they're still asking that today. Well, we're going to make it authentic. We're going to hire this halau with this kumuhula, and we're going to have this, this authentic performance, this authentic history. But who's in control?
Yeah.
Not the kumuhula.
Yeah.
It's the general manager of that hotel,
Yeah.
or the multinational corporation that owns the hotel, that owns the general manager, that pays the kumuhula and their halau. To perform the way they want to. Oh, yeah, they're going to listen. Well, is that how it is? Oh, okay, well, we're going to put you here on stage, and in the back we're going to have a fish tank, and over here we're going to have a fake coconut, that kind of thing. Yeah. I often get asked, with all the conflicting information, which is the one that is the truth? Which is the more correct version? Whatever it is, yeah?
Okay.
When you get a story and you get two different sides of the story, how do you discern which is the more accurate? Maybe truth isn't the accurate word, but the more accurate of the two.
Yeah.
And I go back to what our kupuna Mary Kavena Pukui said. She said, "Nanai ke kumu," and nanai ke kumu means look to the source.
Oh.
So when there's an issue and you got two sides, about the issue that are it's controversial and they're debating it, you have to go look at the issue. You got to go. Don't depend on this fact or that fact. You have to go to the source. My point is that's a part of our culture. To nanai ke kumu. You go to the source.
Yeah.
And I started to talk about sacred places and how access to sacred places for a land-based people that we are, accessing sacred places is vital to me, to the vitality of our to the dynamism and energy of our culture, we got to access these sacred places because this is where stuff was revealed to us. And when I say us, I'm saying kupuna before me, which is why these places are sacred, which is why the kahuna said, put the heiau here. You know, I got asked once, you know, Momi, you say all the land is sacred. Well, I said, well, yeah, it is. This is our mother. All of it is sacred. I said, but there are special little reserves of sacredness that became that from way back. And I think because at that spot was revealed something, or at that spot it connected somehow to another spot that would lead you yet to another spot that would somehow provide answers for that community. You know, so sacred access to sacred places, you know, you deny us the access to the sacred place, you deny us access to the root of our culture. So if you say that we cannot access this heiau, you say that we cannot access this forest, you know, you're denying us a vital part of our culture because of our connection to the land and our connection to the creators that made the land.
Yeah.
You know, the land is to me a manifestation that was given to us by Akua. You know, the Akua is all around us. And I don't use that in the Christian sense of the word. I use it in the old sense of the word. That extraordinary force in life that we cannot explain, but it's there. And it's in everything. So I guess when you come to political consciousness, you begin to understand that part of your culture even more so. But it's not just that. You have to, when you get engaged in your community, then you have to explain it to people.
Yeah.
You have to explain it to non-Hawaiians particularly. Yeah, you got to explain it to your own people. But the ones that get real mahaoi, you know, the ones that get intrusive, they keep asking and asking, and you just go, oh, I have to keep defining and defining. And, you know, with your own people, you don't have to half the time because they know.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that coming to political consciousness, though, helped me articulate better the meanings of things to people who aren't Hawaiian.
Yeah.
The meanings of things to my students who are not Hawaiian, even to my students who are Hawaiian.
Yeah.
So that became a real vital part of me.
Yeah.
That political awakening.